Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as the ADA, you are entitled to reasonable accommodations during the job application process. This video will provide you with information about reasonable accommodations when applying for a job.
Reasonable accommodations include changes to the job application and interview process because of your disability. Examples of accommodations for job applicants include an applicant in a wheelchair asking that the interview take place in an accessible location, an applicant who is deaf requesting an American Sign Language interpreter for the interview, an applicant with a psychiatric disability requesting to bring a support person or a job coach to the interview, or an applicant who is visually impaired asking that the job application be provided in large print.
Some people with disabilities do not need a reasonable accommodation when applying for a job. If you do not need an accommodation, it is your right to keep your disability private. However, if an accommodation is necessary for you to apply for the job, it is your responsibility to request one. Although it is not required to put your request in writing or to use the term reasonable accommodation, it is a good idea to do so. This will make sure that the employer knows what accommodation you have requested and could be helpful if there is later a dispute.
The employer may ask that you consider a different accommodation or for more information or documentation to understand your request and how it relates to your disability.
It is important to respond to these inquiries, known as the interactive process. However, do not sign a general release of medical information, as that is more information than an employer is allowed. Remember that the law requires employers to provide a reasonable accommodation, not necessarily your preferred accommodation. So you should be open-minded and consider possible alternative accommodations that might work for you.
If you ask for a reasonable accommodation, the employer is required to keep your request confidential. That way, your future co-workers will not know about your request or your disability if you want to keep this information private.